welcome to another of my conversations. My name is John Cornicello, and I'm usually here on Mondays and Thursdays at 10. Obviously, we're at a different time this today here. We're at 6 p.m. because it's what, 10 or 11 a.m. in Tokyo, where my
It's
guest
10 a.m.
10
here.
a.m. So, my guest today is Matthew Jordan Smith. He's a fashion, beauty, and celebrity photographer. He's now living in Japan, a Nikon ambassador and educator. And our topic is the subtleties of light, color, and exposure. But I think we're going to cover a lot of other different topics today, too. So, let me introduce to you Matthew Jordan Smith.
How you guys doing? It's good being here. Thank you for making the time to be here and talk photography and life and all that stuff.
So,
Welcome to our world.
Thank you guys. Thank you all for being here. So I see we have Larry here, Ian, Joe, Thomas, Edwin, Daniel. Thank you all for being here so far. Feel free to ask
yeah,
questions.
yeah.
John, it's all yours.
Yeah, so first I want to say it's been 4 years that you're in Tokyo, and it's been about 9 years that we've known each other. Back
Yes.
when Creative Live in the early days, um, Kenna and I used to meet with Craig every week to discuss who we wanted on, and I just kept like, Matthew, we wanted Matthew, we wanted Matthew. Finally, we got you on there, so we really pushed for it, and you were on there twice, I think. You came in back in
Three
September.
times.
Okay, three times. Yeah, it was, so those were great times. Um, so I guess we could start with the obvious thing to talk about. Here's all the protests going on and how they're affecting you in Japan and what you're seeing from the outside watching them.
It's funny because I feel a world away in so many ways, but because I'm American, I've been glued to. At first, I was glued to CNN nonstop. I was glued to CNN and the John Hopkins site, going back and forth to the point where I had to unplug because it's just too much. But with the protests, I've definitely been watching that nonstop. Here in Tokyo, at first there was nothing. There was a small protest, um, or March, I should say protest even, like March last weekend, but a big one scheduled for this weekend. So I'm gonna go to that one for the first time. Even though I'm here in Japan and can't be part of it, um, I have a private group that I teach, and we meet once a week. And there's like about 300 people in the group, and they're from all over the world, and we talk mostly about lighting. But lately we've been talking about world issues, of course, as well, and people are posting pictures from wherever they are, and they're from everywhere, from Israel to Brazil to south of France, all over America, of course. So I get to see their images and what they're doing. And some have asked about, well, what if, I don't want to go out to a protest? How can I still take pictures that mean something? 'Cause I'm always, even before this, I talk about, in photography, it should be not just about you creating beautiful work. It should be like almost a diary of our time here on Earth. And when I look back at my life, I started my career in New York City, and in New York, I lived through the dot-com bust. I lived through 9/11, a big one. You see all these different things happen, and when I look back at my work, I definitely want to see those changes in my work during those times. And I think I started feeling that after going to this museum, this exhibit years ago. I think it's probably one of the most monumental exhibits I've ever seen in my life. It was, for the first time in New York, it was the first time seeing the body of work from Picasso and Matisse, lifetime work. All of New York was going to see this show, and it was so packed. I went three times before I could get in. That's how packed it was. So I finally get in, and what blew me away is, we all know about the work of, Matisse and Picasso, but to see it side by side and see it, as their life changed, from one decade to another. When you see it in that context, you see how it changes through all these things. Like, Picasso, through World War II, his work, if you look at it today, you can tell that's World War II. That was him going through that period in time. And that was monumental for me because it was the first time I'm like, oh, wow, you're not just a photographer, you're not just an artist, you're documenting your life. And you show it in your work. And he did. Whenever we have things like 9/11 or things like this, I think about that exhibit and how my work, no matter where I am, should show how I feel. Um, Whether you're shooting a protest or you're shooting portraits in studio or you're shooting fashion and beauty, you should be able to show that in your work. During 9/11, one of my favorite fashion photographers is a guy named Stephen Meisel. And after 9/11, for those in New York, like, I've always traveled my entire career. And, the day of 9/11, it was a beautiful, beautiful day, which is a rare to have that in Manhattan. It was like a clear blue sky. And the best weather we ever have in New York. And that day was like the perfect day. And then out of nowhere, everything changed. But all of us had plans. We all had plans of what we were going to do the next day, the next week. I was going on a trip, to LA. All of that came to an end. If you guys remember, like, all travel stopped in America after that 9/11. And you start seeing how things happen in life where it's an interruption and you've got to go with the flow. And now we have an interruption again and you've got to stop and pivot. So even in my work, I want to pivot and show, what it feels like. Even though I'm here in Japan, I want to show what it feels like, from my point of view. So, here, obviously, I'm a black man living in Japan, and which also is kind of funny because part of my reason for being here is because um, I want to live in a safer place. I've been to every state in America. Um, on two different projects where I had traveled all over America. I think the first time was doing a project called Lost and Found. And that project, funny enough, was working with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which also meant I had to work for a lot of policemen. Um, and there were times when people felt funny seeing me walk in the room. And I remember all those days very, very well. Um, During that book, Katrina happened. So that project was sponsored by Microsoft. So they would fly me everywhere to photograph people for that project. So I got a chance to see America in every state and get the feeling of it, but still shoot my work um, and document what was going on. So we were doing that book project. It was an altruistic project that Microsoft sponsored, and in between all of that, in the middle of it, Katrina happened. So they sent me to do stuff there also and weave it into the project. Um, and now here we are having, this other, I don't want to call it interruption, but a pivot in our society where um, life changes and we have to do what we can, So here I am in Tokyo, and what am I doing to, like, show how I feel as a black man um, with this issue? I'm doing self portraits because that's all I can do from here. Because you walk outside in Tokyo and it's peaceful and beautiful, and of course, we're dealing with the virus still. That's the main thing here, but it's not like the rest of the world where you see the images that I see in London and in France and everywhere else in the world. You don't see that here on that level.
Yeah, I'm just posting into the chat a few links to Matthew's website and to his Facebook groups so people can check some of that stuff out. Yeah, last night you posted on Instagram a self portrait in a tuxedo.
Yes.
Is there some symbolism to that, or why all dressed up?
Well, a couple of reasons. One that pops out in my mind was being stopped by the police once in LA when I was dressed up. And I'm coming home from someplace and I'm on a high from this, thing I'm coming from, but I get stopped by the police. And in that moment, I had a BMW at the time. I'm coming back from an event, and I'm on this high. I lived in the neighborhood that was prestigious neighborhood, and I'm stopped there. And when those lights come on, it's a very scary thing. I think it's scarier for anybody who is African American, anybody who's black, or a person of color, period, to have that moment when it's like an awakening. You're like, okay, will something weird happen? When I'm stopped, and I don't think most people even think about that. If you get stopped, you're like, oh, okay, let me put up my license, whatever, and you're on. But for me that night, it was, fear for a second, and I don't want to have, a camera on my seat, which I normally do because somebody at night could think of something else. Those things run through your mind um, if you grew up in America. I don't have those fears living here in Japan. Um, but that came to my mind last night when doing that self portrait. Also, what came to my mind was about the power of photography. And we see pictures of people, God forbid when things happen, there's that one image of the person who is the victim, and that picture lives forever. And if anything happens to me, I want to have a picture where I'm dressed up. So I know it sounds weird to even say that, but I think a lot of people need to think about that. Um, what picture would they use if something happens to you? What picture would they use of you to show to the world? Because that image also says something subliminally. If you see a picture of a person, what they look like, if they're dressed, all those things, it forms an opinion of that person. So I think, um, and it's funny because I tell my students in my course, that we should, always work on self portraits. So all during quarantine, I've had all my students doing self portraits, self portraits, self portraits, and not for this reason, but just to have great images of yourself to represent, yourself, and so we can see you and get a good feeling of yourself. I tell them to, to dress a certain way because images subliminally tell you something. So I'm always thinking about that. And even through this whole lockdown, quarantine, now protests, I'm still doing different versions of self portraits. I always try to do it on my birthday, to document, my time on Earth and what I looked like. Even for me to see that, going back over time, we feel we look the same our whole life, but of course, we evolve as well.
Of course,
So
look
I
at
want
that
to
beard you
document
got
that.
there. Quite a
Yes,
little
yes.
trait, huh?
It's a part of it. I know.
Yeah.
Sorry for my long little soliloquy there, but
No, that's great. I mean, I do self portraits all the time too. And anytime I have a client coming in, before they come in, I'm my test subject. I've got my remote trigger, and and I try things. If I want to try lighting things for um, as an experiment, I'm the first one who gets to try it on. Um,
likewise,
I think
likewise.
last year at about the same time we started doing almost the exact same project with the flashing.
I
Uh,
saw that. That was so
yeah,
weird. I saw yours later on. I'm like, oh wow. But nothing is new in life. And
I know, but I
for
just thought it
me,
was it was like March of last year, and then and all of a sudden I started seeing you posted like a day or two within of each other. I don't know which one was posted first, but it was like wow, um, that was. I don't know if you were going to talk about photography a bit, so maybe we can start going that direction.
yes.
That's a
So
mixture of flash and LEDs, right?
yes, exactly. As a matter of fact, I had my LED here. Let me just see. I show you guys mine. I have my LED here now. This is the RE Sky panel
Hmm.
um, that I use a lot for that stuff. Last year, you know, I was flying a lot back and forth to the States, but I'm trying to still get my friend base together. And I'm constantly meeting photographers as I speak at different, photo conventions, even here in Japan. So there's a photographer who I met 2 years ago at one of the conventions here. Um, and I was having dinner one night with my wife, and he was in the same restaurant. He says, "Oh, Matthew." He came over and, and started speaking English to me, and which was a rare thing, of course, here. And we connected and changed cards. And he said, "Oh, what studio do you work out of here in Japan?" I said, "Well, I'm always renting different studios." He says, "Oh, well, I've met a friend who's looking to open a studio, and we're looking for partners to go into. And I'm not sure where you live, but it's in Giogaoka." I'm like, "I live in Giogaoka." And so we all got together and met. He's Japanese American, and the other gentleman was is French. So the three of us got together, and we now work in the same studio together, which is kind of wonderful. Um, it's owned by the French videographer and his wife, but the three of us, we rent it. Well, the other guy and I, we rent it from them. We work in that space. But my friend, um, he has a tight association with Ari, and we start working together and testing and um, playing around with light, and that's how I got started doing that project. And now this is actually his light that I've borrowed for for forever now, and I'm always testing and playing around with
Yeah.
it because
Well, if you
it's an
see,
amazing source.
if you see that one above me there, that's my LED. It's a Savage wand,
Oh,
and it's controlled by my iPhone, so I can do all sorts of patterns with it.
oh, that's amazing.
Amazing.
What I love about this one, I have my strobes in the corner. I've got
Hmm.
Profoto strobes that I use. Profoto is my go-to strobe.
Sure.
Um, And I've always liked using constant lights and strobe lights my entire career. I started off um, as a photo assistant in the 80s, and um, I worked for a photographer who only shot those big uh, RE HMIs. Remember those?
Hmm.
The gigantic, heavy ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
He only used those.
So,
So I
wow.
fell in love with that type of light way back then, and still love it.
Hmm.
And it's funny now, those RHMIs and now this RE Sky panel. But I love the Sky panel because you have all this control you can do right
Hmm.
here from the remote. There are zillions of functions in it. It's made for the film industry, for cinematographers, really,
Hmm.
but it's an incredible light in a big way. Camera wise, I use Nikon.
You're
I'm a
an
Nikon
ambassador.
ambassador. Yep, Nikon ambassador. It was actually the first camera I ever bought in my photo career was a Nikon. And, I've shot everything over the planet, but I came back to what's I'm most comfortable with now. So,
Hmm.
and that's Nikon.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's an
Hey Sarah, how
RGB
you
version.
doing? Good to see you here as well. Cheryl and Daniel have joined us as well. Good to see you guys popping in here. Thank you guys for being here.
And you're someone who relies on your light meter. You're a Sakana person.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I am a big, um, I'm about perfection when it comes to
Hmm.
light. I don't believe, coming from film also, um, I worked first as a photo assistant, um, and numbers don't lie. So I use a meter for everything. I measure everything. Not only do I use a light meter, I use a color meter.
Hmm.
I want to make sure that I know, what my color is, based on the room or the studio that I'm in. I want to know if it's, 5,500 degrees Kelvin. I want to know if there's any fluctuation in terms of being like, 2 points of green or
Hmm.
magenta. I want to know all that stuff so I can make sure I am in control of my exposure down to a tenth of a stop and my color. I want to be precise on all of that. I also use the color checker as well so I can have a profile in my camera. But All
Sure.
that is imperative to have all of that.
Yeah, everyone says, you're working with strobe, the ambient light's not going to really affect the exposure, and maybe it's not, but there's surfaces, environmental surfaces that the lights, that the strobes are bouncing around
Absolutely.
off of, that are going to, like I have a brown floor in my living room here. If I shoot in here, I get a warmer tone,
Yes.
so yeah,
Yes.
it's little subtleties, which is the topic you originally said we should talk about. So let's go a little more into the subtleties of color and exposure.
Beautiful. So like, it's funny in the when everybody was shooting film, I always back then color meters were very popular. Not so much now,
Hmm.
but back in the 80s and 90s, color meters were very popular with, a lot of photographers. I worked with a lot of different photographers as an assistant. One was Gregory Heisler. And Gregory Heisler was extremely precise about everything. Um, and I learned a lot working under him. So in the film days, you find out, you get your neutral image, and then most photographers would adapt and make it look the way they wanted it to look, warmer, cooler, and you use CTO gels or CTB gels or some other kind of, tough spun to create your look, your fingerprint to your image. In digital, a lot of people don't do that because there isn't that, people think you can do it all in
In
Photoshop.
post.
But if you look at an image that's adjusted to be exactly like a quarter CTO, three-quarter CTO, half CTO, and you look at a picture where you're trying to make that look the same way in Photoshop, they look very,
Very
very
different.
different. Very, very different. As a matter of fact, I've never seen an image adjusted in Photoshop that looks anywhere close to the precision of using, CTO or CTD filters to get that exact look. You may feel like that if you're like doing a picture in post, like, oh, I want it to be this warm and it looks right. And it may look just great in that moment. But then let's say you have your body of work over, let's say, a year, 2 years time, and you see all that work all together, and then you see fluctuations in that color. If you have precision, that look is precise and consistent throughout. And that's amazing to see. And I think today, to really like be a master at this craft, because there are so many photographers, you really need to be on top of your light and your color more than ever, because it's not about just having a great picture. It's about the body of work and the body of work being consistent throughout. So if you can see your body of work over the last, year, 2 years, 5 years, there's a consistent feel to the image, and that's precision. Well, that's my take on it anyway.
No, it's always interesting working with you and metering everywhere because I remember working with you and then with Joel Grimes, and then Joel's what's a meter?
Yes, yes.
Some people just go the opposite way, and Tony Corbell has surprised me lately. He was the meter guy too, and all of a sudden he says now that he has his pro photos with TTL, he's using that as his meter. It's like, Tony, what's happening to you?
Let me talk about one thing. This is really funny about color that nobody thinks about and people do not talk about. If you use a color meter, there's something called color rendering index,
CRI.
the CRI. So all lights are not made equally. There are a lot of inexpensive lights out there. There are a lot of, expensive lights out there. But not every light can render the full range of color. And I've seen photographers that ask me like, Matthew, I can't get my color to look like yours. What are you doing? And one thing that is so important is that CRI. And so if you take a reading in that color render index of say your strobe, let's talk about strobe light. That CRI index, let me just hold on. I think I have my meter here. I just want to pull it out for a second. My color meter. So you can see what I'm talking about. The color render index will read the light's ability to give you the full range of color. We don't think about that, but say you're using a strobe, you got it, it was a great deal in that strobe, and to your eye it looks great, and that's true. But it may not be able to read that full range of color. So if you say, okay, I want this red to be this bright, beautiful red, or this great green, or this great, whatever color, and you use your CRI and you find out that it's only going to give you like a color rendering index of like, say, 40% of any color. That's not that full range of color. The CRI can tell you about each light and that light's ability to give you the full range of color. So let me just turn it to CRI index, turn it to ambient. So for example, I'm not sure you can see that very well or not. This gives you a full
Yeah,
range.
it's a little there. That's better.
That's giving you a full range of every color. You can see right now, I'm reading red, R12 is blue. So right now, blue with this is ambient light, and I also have this, fluorescent light. Here, let me just see if I can just read the fluorescent only. Okay, this is good. This is a better version. So this is fluorescent light that I have on top of me, and the red is only giving me 40% with this light.
Yep.
Now, with strobe light, I can see that's going to it'll give me like 90% rendering index. So I can tell that that color, this tells me this light's ability to give me all these colors. And it's not. This is this fluorescent green light. It's not going to give me great color. It's just not. No matter what camera I'm using, no matter, it's just, this light does not have the ability to give me great, beautiful color. So CRI is a big deal, and very few people talk about it. I mean, this is really more for like the cinema industry.
Hmm.
Every gaffer, every grip, they all have these. And I will say that, for a photographer, maybe this is overkill, but if you want great color, and I do, if I want, great exposure, and I do, meters to me are essential. Can you do a picture that looks decent without a meter? Sure. But what about precision, where every picture has your fingerprint? So somebody sees the picture and they know it's your picture without having, your stamp on the picture. That's what a meter can give you, and it's just great. So, of course, I'm old school. I came up, as a photo assistant in New York, working for a lot of great photographers. So I learned that way. But I still teach that same way. I teach all my students that same thing: meter, meter, meter. Meters don't lie. When you think about light today, a lot of people want to get a quote unquote normal picture. We see that today all over because of digital. We see all these normal pictures. But when you deviate from normal, your work has a different feel to it. And that's when you can really stand out as a photographer. Let's talk about what's going on right now. I mean, we're going through the situation that feels anything but normal. So why should the pictures look normal? I feel the picture should look and feel the way you feel. It's an expression. That's what photography is. It's an art form. It's an expression of you, and you have the ability to use your light to make it feel a certain way. So maybe you feel, a bit down as we're going through all this. Maybe you feel a bit down as you're going through coronavirus. Should our pictures look normal through that situation? I don't think so. They should look how we feel. And what light does, and understanding light, it gives you this power to show the world how you feel. Um, Something else I've done over during this period of time that I never thought about before, and is virtual photography. And when I first, and so virtual photography is, the process of a photographer photographing somebody virtually. Um, so I've done 4 shoots like that since we've been in quarantine or in this period. So here I am in Tokyo. I photographed a subject in Sag Harbor. I photographed a subject in France. I photographed somebody in Arizona, somebody in Maryland. So all while I'm here, in Tokyo. And that's brand new. This is something that came about from, this coronavirus that didn't exist before. And when I posted my first picture, some people were like saying, um, "Oh, that's not photography. I would never do anything like that, and it's not the same quality." You're hearing those arguments right away. But then I remember how I felt when digital first came out. I was that guy saying, I would never, ever do that. I definitely said that. That was me. And I said, it's not the same quality. That's the same thing that I said. But then, now in hindsight, going back, if I could go back to my younger self, and I'd say photography is an evolution. We think about the beginning of photography back in, 1826, when that first image was, taken. There's been an evolution, and things change as life changes, and images should evolve as well. So I'm open now to exploring new ways of seeing and documenting and sharing my view. I think that virtual photography should not look like the pictures we did, in January 2020, because it was a different world in January 2020. Then, comes coronavirus, and for the first time in the world, everybody is in this shelter in place mode. Why should the pictures look like what we did before that? They should not. So we are all, in a place where we have technology now that can let us, reach out and talk like we are right now. So why not have our cameras photographing in that way, to show, document that way? So that's what I've been doing. And the funny thing about that also, my friend in France, France was a very, very intense lockdown where they need to have a piece of paper if they went out anywhere. So that brought a lot of depression for a lot of people. You can't go out. Even here in Japan, some of my friends have been fighting through depression from being home, um, and in the States as well. People who are by themselves and don't have an outlet. For my friend in France, she said that that photo shoot was like it gave her life again. And for me also, I will say it felt so good to photograph somebody in that way. We made amazing images. You have to direct in a different way, of course, when you're doing a virtual photo shoot. You have to go through the process of um, finding light and directing them, because a model won't know, or a subject won't know about light. They'll see light in a room like, oh, I have light, but it may not be good light. You, as photographer, have to direct them into good light and direct them probably more than you would in a normal shoot. But that too is fun, and it's practice for us in directing. But I love those shoots, those images. I may have done the first virtual celebrity photo shoot. So I forgot a celebrity who was in Sag Harbor uh, and felt like he was stuck, couldn't get out. He's there in Sag Harbor. He's in an amazing place, of course, celebrity, big space, but still feeling the same way everybody else feels, confined. So it was a creative outlet for him, for me, and for everybody who I've shot. It's been a lot of fun. So I think we should all be open to new avenues of using our art form.
Yeah, when I teach about color too, getting the right color is a starting point. You have a baseline. I say correct color isn't always pleasing color. You may want to warm it up. You may want to change it later, but having a starting point that you know is where to go from.
Definitely
Yeah,
is. It
there's
definitely is.
there's situations where you need exact color, cosmetics, fashion, um, things like that. But portraits, start somewhere, but then make it your own.
So this is funny. We had a lot of time on our hands. Or I know I did. Um, so I put together. I could have never done this any other time because it was impossible to have the time to do it. But I put together this thing I want to give away to people. So I give away here also. But I went and photographed, all the color correction filters. And I photographed them on me because one thing I used to do back in the day, say you go to buy a filter. Um, you have no idea what that filter looks like in a photograph, right? Because you hold it up in the store or even with the swatch book, and it looks like the colors you think you want. And then you go and photograph that filter, and it's way off from what you think it's going to look like. Have you guys had that situation before? Because I've had that a million
Hmm.
times. It was frustrating. So I photographed all the filters on me. And I use a mannequin head also. I have a mannequin head and I had myself. So I did self portraits of me in every single color correction filter out there. And I put together a little booklet. Um, and it's just, kind of cool to have that. But
Yeah.
if you go to smartphotofilters.com, you'll see my giveaway that I've made to give to, like, I made it for like all my friends and photographers, and I'll give it away to you guys as well. So it's a cool reference for you in terms of understanding color correction. So it's smartphotofilters.com. I never would have had time to do that. It was time consuming.
I can imagine.
But
Another,
it was actually fun too. For me, it
yeah,
was fun doing it.
what I do with myself and my mannequin heads is photograph with every modifier I have, because a lot of them change the color too.
I've done that too.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, I have some Shamira light banks that are maybe 20, 30 years old, and they've gone a little warm over the years,
Yes, they do.
so yeah.
The older they get, the more they change in color and get a little warmer and warmer and warmer.
Exactly, exactly. Let's see, there's a couple of questions have come into the chat there. Um,
Cool.
let's see. First issue is saying that he's always inspired by your words. He was with us out in Arizona last September.
Ah, yes.
Let's see. Daniel Poirier is asking, are there exceptions when you meet her? Outdoors, maybe, or golden hour? Um, if there are exceptions, what's your fallback?
Oh, well, I always want to know what the normal exposure is, period. I always want to know what's normal. The meter's not going to think for us. It's going to give us information, and then it's up for us to interpret that information. And I'm always doing that. So I'll find out what is the normal exposure, and then I'll dial in what I always call my normal. So let me explain what that means. Let's say I take a meter reading and it's the golden hour and it says, um, 5, 6, 250th of a second. That's that normal exposure. And this is talking about exposure now versus color. So I'll have that exposure reading, but I do a lot of beauty and I want to always overexpose by a third. This is why I think, knowing your meter reading down to a tenth is so important. My normal is a third overexposed. I actually don't even like the word overexposed because I think it's more of a feeling you get. If you show a person three pictures, one normal, one a stop overexposed, one a stop underexposed. Let's take photography out of the equation. You show it to a regular person. Three pictures. One a stop underexposed, one a normal exposure, one a stop overexposed. They won't say, oh, that's over, that's under. What they'll say is, oh, that picture that's underexposed, oh, wow, that looks moody. All of a sudden, they're talking about an emotion,
Mhm.
not an exposure. And you learn really fast that emotion is what sells. So if you can own an emotion, Think about how powerful that is. If you can own an emotion so everybody who sees your pictures, they feel a certain way, that's powerful. So I read my meter and I dial in my normal. And same for color. Think how color makes you feel. If you go to see a movie, I'm a big movie buff, you know, and very often I'm telling my students to, like, watch a certain movie with the sound off so you can see things in a certain way. You know, what was the show that was really big last year? Game of Thrones, Winter's Coming. Um, there were a lot of complaints about it being so dark, so dark. But it was shot that way for a reason, because they wanted to feel moody and dark and heavy. And that's exactly how it felt. It wasn't underexposed. They used this really deep blue light. But it wasn't blue light. It wasn't underexposed. It was moody.
Blue makes
So when
you
you
feel
learn how to play
cold.
around with all those variables, that exposure and that color, it gives you power as a photographer. I know it's a long answer, but
No, can you hear me now? My microphone was cutting out. Okay.
yes, I can hear you. I
Yeah.
can hear
Oh,
you.
good. Okay. Let's see. Edwin was asking, wouldn't this also be influenced by variances in the camera sensor capturing the color information?
Yes, every camera is going to be different. Absolutely. Every camera is going to be different. I do shoot a color checker so I can have that profile in my camera. But, and also, I mean, if you get deeper and deeper into color, you go down that rabbit hole, there are a lot of variations into it. Um, I brought on a color expert into my group recently, from Freestyle in LA. For those who know Freestyle in
Mhm.
LA, Freestyle is incredible in terms of printing and being masters of color. If you go down that rabbit hole of printing and color, it goes deeper and deeper and deeper. You can have just having more control, the better. The more control you have, the better. So you know your camera, your gear, your lights. That gives you a step above everybody else.
So Evan also added, do you base your decision on the RGB channels and a histogram, such as the red value looks like the red?
I never look at the
I
histograms.
don't either.
I never, ever look at the histograms. I always go by the meter and find out what's normal and go from there. But here's the thing about the histogram. So let's say you look only at histograms. You won't learn about light. This is my one thing that I always want to talk about with, say, let's see a light meter versus your histograms only. If you look at just your histograms, yes, you will find out, if you are peaking, if you are, over, under, you'll find that out by looking at your histograms for sure. But what you won't find out is where exactly is the light. Like, let's say you're doing just a simple portrait, like from here to here, and you meter with your histograms, you find out, exactly what you're getting a normal exposure, you get it just right, and you get a decent image. With a light meter, that same picture, you can find out exactly how that modifier, whichever one you're using, how it spreads the light. You'll find out if it's 5 6 here, if it's 4 5 here, if it's 5 6 5 here. You'll find out that fluctuation, or if it's totally even. You cannot see that in histograms. So you learn about light by using a meter, and you learn about each and every one of your modifiers and how that modifier throws light, shapes the shadows. All that information is critical. Now, if you just want to do a picture and have a decent picture, sure, use histograms. But if you want to be able to charge more, stand out more, get big assignments, have more and more control. Or even you just want to take better pictures, period. Say you do it as a hobby, but you want to get better and better and better. learn to use the meter and read light. It's going to open another door for you altogether.
So over in Facebook, I saw a comment from Wilma asking, how do you do a virtual shoot?
Ah, great question. Great question. So, okay, this would be me doing a virtual shoot. I probably would not use this lens that I have on here right now, but this is my Z6, which I normally use my Z6 for doing video. Well, I actually did my portraits last night with my Z6. So I bring my subject to, we use Zoom as a platform. You can use FaceTime, but I use Zoom, the same platform we're using right now. And I have my model, like you are right now, looking at her monitor. Maybe she's on an iPad or a computer or a phone. I bring them into the light so that they are front lit. I make sure I like having clean background, so I try to move them around to find a place that's clean, so there's no distractions. I think that when you're shooting, you've got to have a hero in the picture, that one element that stands out, and I want that to be my subject. So I want cleaner backgrounds. So once I have all that together, I direct them into the monitor. I tell them how to move so that they're in the frame that I want to be, and then I'm going to photograph them just like this. So that's me doing a virtual shoot. I'm photographing my screen with my camera. They are in front of their device. Now, in terms of photographer, I think it's great you have a monitor, something that's flat. You don't want to have it at an angle, because that's going to change. You want it flat so you have, a straight image. And then I photograph my screen. Virtual photography.
It's pretty wild.
Sounds crazy, I know, but
Yeah.
this, when you see the images, it kind of blows you away. And I use On One as one of my programs, and I love I want to make it look like film, like old-fashioned film. I add grain to the image. I'll turn it into black and white so it seems more timeless, and you make your look.
Mhm.
And it will blow you away to see what those images look like. Once you wrap your head around what you're doing and move all the barriers that we have, because we have these rules in photography. But this is an evolution. There are no rules. Right now it's so rare to be able to be at the beginning of something. And this is the beginning of virtual photography. And you shoot it and you get this image that is actually quite interesting. And I know it's not looking like pictures we did in January of 2020 or anything last year. It looks different, but it should look different because we are in a period like we've never been in before.
Are you picking up the pixel pattern in the monitor and using that as part of the look?
I am adapting that by using the grain. So I'll
Mm,
add grain to it
okay.
in post, and that to me gets rid of that
Okay.
and changes it. And
Cool.
then also I'll go into Photoshop and I'll add Gaussian blur, and that takes it all away, totally.
Nice. Nice. Let's see. Nothing else coming in the chat there. Let's see. We talked about subtleties of color, of light, exposure. Um, how about the folks here? Anyone want to unmute and ask any questions?
Yeah,
Joe, it's Joe.
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Ian. Go ahead.
Matthew, I think I remember first meeting you 15, 17 years ago at a convention in Las Vegas. I don't remember what association or whatever it was, and you did a workshop and you introduced your new book, Sepia Dreams.
Yes.
Yep. And I bought a copy from you, and you had a table set up, and you were selling them. And I've seen you over the years. We would see each other at various events in LA and so forth. But going back to Sepia Dreams, which if people have not seen it, it's probably one of the most extraordinary photo books I think has ever been done, and it's more than just a photo book. But how do you find that you photograph 50 incredible people? How do you find what you're doing now as compared to having done Sepia Dreams?
Oh, wow. Thank you. I mean, I love that book, Sepia Dreams. That was my very first one. I've done two more since, and I was in the process of doing a third one when the virus hit. Um, I photographed Aretha Franklin for the last 13 years of her life, and I was going to turn that into another book as well. But then life happened and derailed that a bit because the book was going to be printed in China and all these different things, and so the publisher is kind of locked down as well now. Um, I think what I'm doing now is definitely another phase. I think I'm doing my best work ever now. Um, there are a couple of reasons why I moved to Japan. Um, and I talk about those quite a bit lately, but before I didn't talk about those at all. One was for safety reasons. I felt it was safer to be out of America um, as a black man, which is kind of funny going through that now. I didn't say it to any of anybody outside of my friend group. Another reason is for, my wife's Japanese, but we could have lived in the States, of course, but we just chose to live here in Japan, close to her family. The other reason was I want to work on a new art form that I feel I discovered. And by art form, I think photography is an art form. I think cinematography is an art form. Of course, there are many art forms, but I feel I've discovered a new art form, and I felt I needed to be here to bring that art form to life. So that's also what I'm working on, and I think that's my best work ever. And that's not photography. It's a new art form.
And I guess one of the other projects was The Future Presidents.
Yes, that was my last book. So Future Presidents was my last book I did in the States. So before I moved away, I did a book called Future American President, where I went to every state and photographed 100 children with the idea of being a future president. Now, what was interesting about that project is I can't imagine doing that book now. Um, I had this idea of going from state to state and approaching strangers and asking them, can I photograph their children? Which sounds scary, sounds crazy. Um, but I wanted to do a book that could inspire young people in a positive way to think about, to see themselves as doing something amazing in their life. I wanted to plant that seed at an early age, which is why I want to go to strangers. Photography is powerful. We take that for granted as adults. But if you take a child and you make them the hero, that sticks. So I want to go and find 100 strangers, approach the parents, tell them what I'm doing, and then in that moment, put that child in front of the spotlight where everybody's focused on them and kind of uplift them. That was the whole idea about the book. So in the very beginning, I almost talked myself out of it because I'm like, who was going to let me photograph their child? If I go from a state to state to state, they don't know anything about me at all. So thinking about that, and I was asking friends at the time around, like, if I walked up to you, a black man in America, you don't know me from anybody, and asked you, can I photograph your child? Of course, all the, bells and whistles are going off like, no, 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 no. But so I know everybody's going to have that reaction right away. So I've got to do whatever I can to first make them comfortable before I even ask the question. So I took my first two books with me. I took Sepia Dreams with me, Ian, and I also took my second book called Lost and Found. So I went on the road with those two books. And I went on the road with samples of my work also, so I could show them that I'm not some lunatic. Here I'm doing a new book project. These are my first two books. I'm doing a new book. I want to put your child in this book. This book's going to be called Future American President. It's not political. It's not about, Democrat or Republican. It's all about making your child feel like one day I could possibly, run a major corporation, be a president, go just do whatever is imaginable. So that was that book about, and I went out and went to every state, and oddly enough, I didn't get that many no's.
Nice.
Sounds crazy now to think about that. I mean, you think about today, it sounds crazy to even think about that. But I went from every state in America doing that project. And that was my third book before I moved to Japan.
Joe, did you have a
Nice.
question?
For next book.
I sort of half question, half comment. Matthew, early on, you were talking about photographer's body of work. And I think I just mainly wanted to say that when you said that, it really kind of struck me right away as something, one, that I haven't heard really spoken about that much, but also like right now in the situation we're in, I am doing some photography work, and it's very, in one way or another, it has to kind of be introspective because you've got nowhere to go, And I just wanted to say that phrase and the way you talked about that just seemed more powerful now than maybe normally when you're distracted by so many things that are imposing on your work. Right now, all there is the photographer.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it was really interesting that you said that.
No, thank you so much for saying that, Joe. I think this is a point when we all have this self-reflection. And you think about all these things that are going on this year. I was having a conversation last night with a friend online, and she said something to me that made me stop. I'm like, wow. She's like, I was thinking about the coronavirus and how we're all, wearing masks to protect our breath.
Hmm.
And she's talking about, then I talk about, what's going on now with the protest that happened because a man lost his breath. And, it's just all these weird correlations of all this, and, is it happening for a reason? All of this at this one time. Here we are all, in this shelter in place mode. Maybe we'll be back in there again later on this year. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. It seems like every single week is like unknown. It's like from week to week to week. We can't imagine 5 months from now. We can't even imagine a week from now. But when you think about your work, your body of work, you think about this time, today, what can I do today to show what it feels like to go through this day by day by day? Not even, month by month, but day by day. What does it feel like from a photographer? If, 10 years from now, somebody says, maybe your child or your grandchild or your friend says, what were you doing on, June 12th, 2020? And you can show a picture of that moment, how you felt, what was going on from that day. And then you can say, and this was June 15th, this is June 19th, and this was June. You show this period, what it felt like, and they can almost relive that moment. I mean, that's what we have. I think photography is more powerful now than ever before. We're seeing all this video, and something is very different between video and that still frozen image. That still frozen image is so very, very powerful. And I think we're seeing that today now, the power of that still image. I think people have forgotten about that for a long time.
Yeah, as you
And
said
now we're
that.
seeing it.
Yeah, as you said that, Kent State just popped into my mind.
We remember those moments. I remember those pictures from my childhood, that Eddie Adams shot,
Mm-hmm.
from Vietnam. We remember those still moments. In video, it's a little different. It's a little different. Those
Well,
still pictures make a big
yeah,
impact.
we're at the hour here. I don't
Absolutely.
know what your schedule is today, Matthew, if you need to head out or if you've got a couple of seconds.
I have a little time more. It's my morning. It's only 11 o'clock in the morning.
Okay,
So,
I'll just,
and we're in the
just,
rainy season now, also in Japan.
just wanted to check in with you. Um, anyone else here have anything they want to
Yeah, I
contribute
had a
here?
quick question for you, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
As a professional photographer, um, you're actually taking and allowing others to see through your eyes what you're witnessing when you capture those images.
Very, very true. Very, very true. We are, I mean, people are being a voyeur through our eyes. You know, it's our point of view as photographer. You know, there are other things going around, but we focus on something that we think is important in that moment to share with the viewer. You make that choice in what you shoot and what you show, and that's powerful. That's why that whole thing of point of view, having a point of view is so important. You know, if you're say you're out photographing any protests, it's not just about photographing the protests, but it's your point of view. And we're seeing all that. You see, you know, any newscast, it's that newscast point of view. And you as a photographer, you too have that power, and not just now in the protests, but every single time you take a picture, anytime. That's your point of view. Whether you're shooting a wedding or you're photographing a portrait, it's always your point of view, and your point of view can never be wrong. So think about that. That's powerful for you as the photographer. It's not just a picture. It's you documenting your life and you sharing your point of view. And that's powerful. Thanks for that, Thomas.
No problem.
Yeah. And you, like you said before, you've traveled quite extensively, like once a month to the US, and now it's been 3, 4 months, 5 months without it. When do you think you're going to be able to travel again, and how comfortable do you feel about it? And I guess that leads into the conventions too, WPPI and Photo Plus and things like that. Do you have any thoughts about all that?
I definitely do. I definitely do. I don't think I'll be back on a plane again this year, to be honest. I don't think
Hmm.
I'm going to be, I don't think I'll travel again. You know, it's funny because I'm at the highest level of award for travel. Um, you got a gazillion miles, airline miles. I don't see myself flying at all for the rest of this year. And, you know, last 20 years, that's been my life. I've always been traveling.
Hmm.
Um, Last year, I went 11 times to the States, went to Europe once, went to other places in Asia. So I traveled a lot last year. 11 times to the States, but a lot of places I went elsewhere as well, like twice around Vietnam, Thailand, Austria. All that was last year. And it's funny to sit still, but it's actually good to sit still as well because you get to reflect on things and see things that you don't see when you're always running, 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 running. I'm doing some things that I never had the time to do before. And to be honest, in some ways, I'm kind of enjoying this moment to be still. Um, it feels like a reset in some ways, and sometimes a reset, well, actually is necessary. And it feels like the world's having a reset.
True.
Matthew, could you, obviously the photos on behind you were some that you picked out as special to you. Could you tell us a little bit about them?
Yes, yes, yes. So let me move this out the way again.
Yeah.
So I left my house for the first time in 3 months this week to do two things: to have some new pictures printed. So I went to the lab and had them printed. And then I also went and had them framed. So yesterday I went and had them framed. This is my first time leaving the house to do that. But you know, I love having images. This is Mount Fuji, which is a very mystical, beautiful mountain. You can see it from all over Japan. It seems like, you know, it's, you know, hours away, but you can see it from Tokyo. Um, and sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's not. I love work like this, but I also love my fashion beauty work. My entire career has been about beauty, which I do a lot of. Let me just pick that one up for a second. This is basically what I do most of the time. I'm shooting close, tight images, faces. This was shot last year on a trip to the States. One of the trips I went on, this one is this is the very last photo shoot of Aretha, her last official photo shoot. And I love this picture because we were joking and she was laughing at me joking. And I've got a million stories about Aretha Franklin. But
My favorite is you singing to her.
yes, yes, for those who don't know that story. So I've told this story a million times, but I'll tell you guys also because I shot her so much. Aretha Franklin was a diva in many, many ways, but an amazing woman. And I got to know her very well. She only liked to hear her music when we were working together. And one day we were shooting in New York. We always shot in either New York or LA or in Detroit. This day we were shooting in New York City. And she had a lot of energy this day, which is not always the case. Some days she'd be tired and we'd start shooting an hour in and she'd say, okay, we're done. This day she was full of energy. And we're playing her music in studio. And I had this list of music I'd play for her of my favorite Aretha Franklin songs. And this day we're playing and I'm shooting her close, you know, this distance. And it's a song that I love. And she starts singing. She would always sing during the photo shoots. And as she's singing, the whole room is getting like this free concerts. And she's close to me and I'm loving the song. And I decide to start singing along with her. And all of a sudden she stops singing and she looks at me and she says, Jordan, baby, don't sing. And the whole room busts out laughing. I mean, like my crew, her team, they're all laughing at me, including Aretha Franklin. And I'm embarrassed in the moment, but I keep shooting her and she's laughing. I love those pictures. I mean, the pictures of her laughing at me was actually kind of like this same grin. You know, she's like laughing, the whole room was laughing at me, but the pictures were amazing. And I love that moment. I mean, that day we shot in studio, but I never tell this part of the story. We took a break that day for like 2 hours. And then we went to Times Square and we shot out night outside in Times Square. This is that same day. It was just an amazing, magical day. So imagine Aretha Franklin, we're doing a shoot in Times Square at night. You know, I had to, you know, hire policemen to, you know, block off Times Square area. You had to get
Crowd
permission, of
control.
course. Yeah, we needed that. But the policemen were fans of hers. So they weren't even thinking about, but they wanted to get, you know, a picture with her. It was just a weird, crazy night, but it was fun. It was an amazing night, seeing the crowd just being around, you know, asking her to sing while we're taking pictures. And it was just a magical, amazing, that day was incredible. Incredible. Same with Tyra. I've shot Tyra, you know, for forever. Since the beginning of my career, when I was an assistant, I was shooting Tyra. Her first swimsuit calendar. She wasn't famous back then, but she used all her mileage and she brought this whole team together. This makeup artist Sam Fine, this hairstylist Oscar James, myself, and Tyra and her mother. That was it. And my two assistants went to Jamaica, and then together we did her first swimsuit calendar. And we had so much fun. We're all staying in the same house. We rented like a little house together, and we all stayed there. Cooked food together. We did everything together for that whole. It was so much fun. That's been my life in photography. It's just this. It's not just the image. It's these memories that we're making, and in the course of those making those memories, you have this one glimpse of a moment from that day. This is a glimpse of a moment.
Beautiful.
The day was incredible, and this is just that one instant of that day that you get to share with people.
Yeah.
This is why I love photography.
Photography is both a product and a process.
Yeah,
It's
a
the
beautiful
process for many of us.
process. Yeah, in many ways. In many ways.
Well,
That's just wonderful.
thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you, guys. I've never shared that full story like that
Yeah,
before.
thank you.
Thank you.
But that's always been my favorite. Jordan, don't sing.
I cannot sing at all, but she called me Jordan, and even the last 6 months of her life, we were planning a photo shoot, and actually the last 9 months of her life, we were planning a photo shoot, and she wanted to shoot in New York, and she had a crazy schedule. She was doing this benefit for Elton John. It's her last trip, period, actually. She was in New York. She's doing this benefit for Elton John. She was also going to do a talk show that same night, and she wanted to do a photo shoot that same day. And she's telling me all this, and I know Aretha. I'm like, there's no way she can do all that. And she's fighting cancer. She didn't want to tell anybody she was fighting it, but she was fighting it. She was weak, and she wanted to do all this stuff in one day. So I tell her over the phone, I'm like, let's wait till you get back and do it in Detroit. Let's do it like the next week back in Detroit. After the talk show, after the Elton John thing. So she goes to New York, she does Elton John's benefit. The late night show, the host's mother, I think, got sick and passed away. So that got canceled. So she didn't do that. But she also got sick on that trip. When she got back to Detroit, we couldn't shoot. She's rushed to the hospital. She gets out, and it's coming up on November, and she wants to do the photo shoot in the weekend of Thanksgiving. So we put together, we're talking on the phone left and right, and she calls me. She calls like every day. She's like, "Oh, I'm going to cook food for this photo shoot. I'm going to make this." She told me she's going to make. She's going to make this. I'm going to make that, and I've got this new thing coming out, and I'm going to sell my recipes to Walmart, and she's just saying all this stuff. So I'm in Tokyo. I hire my team. We rent the studio in Detroit. We buy tickets for the whole crew, for me, for the assistants. It's the Saturday after Thanksgiving. We're going to do this photo shoot. All the tickets are bought. Everything's booked. It's the night before Thanksgiving. And I get an email from her that's like 3 words, not feeling good. I'm like, what does that mean? So then I'm trying to call people because I only don't talk to her. She only wanted to talk to me. There was no manager. There was nothing. It was just her and I. And I don't hear anything. So I'm trying to get through to somebody. I call Clive Davis's assistant, who reaches out to her some kind of way, and they find out that she is in the hospital. Oh my God. So I called my agent on Thanksgiving Day in New York. I said, I don't think the shoot's going to happen Saturday. I think she's in the hospital, and I think we should just call and cancel the studio. I know it's Thanksgiving, but Friday we need to try to contact everybody and cancel everything. So we do, and she's in the hospital until I think it's either right after Christmas or right beginning in January. She's in the hospital that entire time. She gets out and she's weak. We talked like in January for the first time, and she's still saying she wants to do the photo shoot. She's like, I've lost a lot of weight. I've got to get my strength back, but um, let's just stay in contact. We'll do the photo shoot. So all of that year, or all the few months, while she's still alive, we talked more and more when she could. Um, but she never recovered, and we never did the photo shoot.
But you had that experience with her, though. That was great.
I have that experience. I have those conversations in my
Hmm.
head, and uh, even one day I remember she got mad at me because she couldn't contact me. She couldn't figure out the whole, America to Japan
Oh,
thing.
yeah, the
Um,
codes.
no, she could. She was not one for that. She was just, if she wanted to talk to you, she wanted to talk to you. She didn't care if it was like, 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, and I'm asleep. She's like, I'm trying to get in contact with you, and where are you? And she was mad at me one day. Uh, so I had to call her, and I'm trying to call her, calling her back over and over again. She's like, she sent me an email, um, basically saying like, when I call, you need to be there.
It's like having a
That
mom.
was Aretha. Yes, yes, it was. It's like having a mom. It's like having a mom. Um, but I love that woman. I love her, and I love all the memories I had with her. Um, and I had that with a lot of clients, even today. Still had those moments with other clients, and I love that photography has given me that.
Mhm.
Um, I had bought gifts I wanted to give to her on the last shoot that I never got to give her. I had gone to Bali, and I had bought. This is so weird. I had bought her this mirror from Bali that I wanted to give her, and never got to give it to her. Crazy.
You remind me much of myself. If there's every time someone says, "Do you have?" I can reach over and grab it.
It's funny because this is never in this room, but I asked my wife for a mirror because I wanted to look at myself before I went on today.
Do you know the Japanese word "sadonko"?
So, Uncle, hi, hi,
About having too many books that you'll never read.
hi.
I just think
Wakarimasu.
that about stuff. I have stuff that no one thinks they'll ever need, and when they need it, I have it here for you.
That's true. That's very, very true. That's funny. That's funny.
Yeah. Cool. Well, it's 7:20 here, 11:20 there. I think we'll start wrapping up.
Sounds
Um,
good.
do you still keep in touch with Greg Heisler?
It's so funny you mentioned that. It's so funny you mentioned that. I was going to call him this week.
Hmm.
That is so strange.
Well, I just emailed him a day or two ago suggesting that he join and come on one of these conversations.
I
So,
wish he had joined today.
yeah, tell him about it.
My last job as a photo assistant
Hmm.
was for Gregory Heisler.
Yeah.
I had stopped working as an assistant, but he had this job he had gotten. Oh man, he had gotten this job for GQ magazine, and he called me. He says, I have this assignment, and I really want you to come with me on this job. And I said, well, Greg, I've really stopped assisting. I'm trying not to take any more assisting jobs. He says, let me tell you about the job, and you can make up your mind if you want to come or not. So he tells me about the job, and I say, I'm coming. So he got this job for GQ magazine to photograph the last living survivors of the Tuskegee
Oh,
experiment. And I say, I'm going. They were in, is these two gentlemen. No, I'm sorry, it was one gentleman. He was in Georgia, just outside of Atlanta. So we fly down there from New York um, to do the photo shoot. And it was incredible to see this guy, to meet him, to be in the room, hear his stories. And then he says, I'm not the only one. There's one more living survivor, and he's in Alabama. And Greg says, do you know him? He says, yeah, of course I know him. He says, do you mind giving him a call? And, would he mind if we can go down there? He says, Matthew, would you mind going? I'm like, absolutely, let's do it. So we get in contact with the guy, and he says, sure, come here. So Greg and I jump in a car, rent a car, and we drove to Alabama, and we photographed that guy. That was my last job as a photo assistant
Nice. Nice.
with Greg. With
Mhm.
Greg,
Yeah, Greg's a great guy.
amazing guy, amazing guy.
Cool. Well, any last words from anyone else here?
I can only say that I'm really happy for this Zoom thing and getting to back in touch or getting to chat with Matthew once again after all these years. It's pretty. This has been very special for me. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here, for letting me, spout on about photography and life, and it's just good having all you guys here. I love this a lot. And thank you, John, for this
Sure.
opportunity.
Sure. Love having you here. Next time I get to Japan, I'll have to visit.
Yes, please.
I know Kim was supposed to go in March, but that got postponed till next year, and we'll see if I join her. See
Hopefully,
what
by
I
the
can-
time next year, it'll be a different world
Yeah,
altogether.
I hope so.
Yes.
So we're getting a few thank yous from the chat room. Great conversation. Thanks, Matthew. Joe had to jump out, but I think everyone really enjoyed this, and we'll have a recording of this, so we'll be able to share it far and wide. It's been great,
Wicked.
great stories. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you,
Appreciate
guys. Have a great evening, everyone, or day wherever you guys are in the world.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks. And coming up,
Arigato gozaimasu.
I'm going to have a few people on. I'm going to have Bambi Cantrell on. I'm working with Kim Weston to come on. Yeah, so we've got a few things coming up. So check my website for those.
Fantastic. Tell Bambi I said hi.
Will do. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Likewise. Bye, everyone.
Bye.